Hey developers, today we're going to look at an amazing, blazingly fast unit test framework powered by Vite called Vitest. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically a super powered way of doing tests inside Vite. And in this video today, I'm going to show you how to get started with Vitest. We're going to create a couple of different components. We're going to mock those components out and test requests functionality using a library called MSW. We're going to use the testing library. We're going to use Vue test utils. But don't worry if you are a React developer. I would say watch this video. It's going to be almost exactly the same as in React as it is in Vue, though we will be using Vue as our testing environment. So I'm really excited about this library. I'm actually a sponsor of it. I think it's an amazing tool. I think a lot of Vue developers, a lot of anybody that's using Vite probably should be using Vitest. But before we get too far, let's talk about .tech domains. Hey developers, stop what you're doing for a moment and really check out this interactive experience. It's Break the Code 2 by .tech domains. They created basically Windows 98 in your web browser. But what's really cool about it, it's actually not just Windows 98 in a web browser. It's an interactive game and it has puzzles and secrets in it, and you can win prizes. So you can win exclusive Keanu Reeves signed script from The Matrix. You can win the James Bond GoldenEye weapon system. And all you need to do is kind of click around. There's this story here. I don't want to give anything away. They even have like Web Explorer, like old school Internet Explorer 11. They have a terminal, but you have to kind of search around this interactive Windows 98 site and solve the puzzles. They even have Clippy here in the right-hand side, and you can win prizes. So I wouldn't normally promote something like this, but this is just a really cool thing brought to you by Break the Code 2 from .tech domains. I'm going to leave a link in the description so you too can kind of play this interactive game and try to figure it out. Like I said, this is inside the web browser. If you didn't know, I think I'd be in an old school Windows 98. So yeah, check this out and let me know what you think. If you win something or you find something out, leave a comment below. Once again, make sure you go to this website. I highly recommend it. I've been playing around with it. It's pretty fun. Thanks. Thank you to .tech domains. And remember, .tech domains has made a comeback with Break the Code 2.0, and it's absolutely insane. So go ahead and play so you don't miss out. Go to go.tech/pwebtc. That's go.tech/pwebtc. That'd be awesome. That's going to help this channel out. So make sure you click on the link in the description. Thanks. Let's take a look at Vitest. And before we dive into it, let's take a look at why you may want to use it for your next project. So I'm here at the vitest.dev website. If I click on why Vitest, it basically says that Vitest is a native test runner for Vite. So instead of having to worry about setting up a bunch of configurations and dealing with complexities of transforming source files, it's all built into Vite itself. It gives Jest some credit that it's adopted a lot of the patterns from Jest, including mocking, snapshots, and coverage from it. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. They even have inside here a comparison guide where you can kind of get even more information of why you may want to use Vitest instead of Jest. I can tell you personally, I set up Jest. Jest does work with Vite, but there was a lot more configuration. I had a lot more problems when I was starting off with it. And starting with Vitest makes it much easier. You can also use Vite's configuration files, will work naturally with Vitest, so it makes it a lot easier to get working. So there's actually two ways we can set up Vitest in our app. So if you have an existing Vite app and you've come to this video, thank you for watching. What you need to do is go to the vitest.dev and look at the adding Vitest to your project. So in that case, you would use this npm install and it would install it. There's very little configuration, but if you need to, you can add this test object into your Vite config file, and then you just add it into your script. So you can add test or coverage, and it's Vitest. And we'll look at that here in a second. And then there's a bunch of commands: watch, run, dev, and so on and so forth. One thing to keep in mind is that it does recommend that you install JS DOM or Happy DOM for DOM mocking. So you are going to want to install JS DOM. It doesn't come out of the box with it, but you want to install that to make sure that you can get up and running quickly. And then you need to set up your scripts folder, and then I would follow this getting started guide here. For the sake of simplicity, there's a lot of scaffolding and tooling in the developer world for React, Vue, and Angular, and Svelte, and all these other ones. And some of them actually do include Vitest out of the box. I'm going to show you one way of doing that. We're going to install a new Vue app using the Vue at latest. That's going to include a couple of libraries. We're going to be using this Vue test utils, and then we're going to be using something called the testing library. And if you're coming from the React world, you'll recognize this. This is a really popular library and promoted by Kent C. Dodds. It works with Vue and React and Svelte. It looks very, very similar. If you write tests in Vue or React, you're going to feel, if you're coming from React and you're going to Vue, you're going to feel very at home with this. And basically this is a wrapper around Vue test utils. So let's go ahead and look at that. And if you want to, there's going to be timestamps at the bottom of this video so you can skip ahead if this isn't interesting to you. So I'm going to do npm init Vue at latest. And what this is going to do is going to ask me a few questions. So I'm going to say this is a Vue test project on YT. I'm going to add TypeScript, no JSX. It's not do no router, no pinya. Yes for Vitest for unit testing, since we're going to be doing that in this video today. We're not going to do Cypress. We're not going to add ESLint, and that should be it. So I'm going to go to the folder. And one thing I want to make sure is that I install the libraries I need. So I'm going to install this one more library. I'm going to install this -d, it's the developer dependency and development dependency. We'll do testing library Vue. And that way it comes with it. Now, out of the box, it doesn't actually come with it out of the box. It comes with Vue test utils and Vitest, but it doesn't come with the testing library, so we have to install that separately. So let's just take a moment. Okay, great. Everything's installed. And you can see here in the right-hand side, I have this. This is the new project that I created. We're going to do some cleanup on it, but first, let's just take a look how you run unit tests. So if you look in the package.json file and you take a look here, you can see right here I have scripts. And in scripts, I do have a test unit, which runs the Vitest environment JS DOM. This is really important. If you happen to run Vitest on the command line, you'll need to make sure you put -- environment JS DOM, or they just won't work. But it already has it in here, so do npm run test unit. And if I spelt that wrong, I apologize. So the lowercase u. You can see it already ran one test has already passed. So we've already started our journey of running tests. Let's take a look at the one test it actually has. So if you look at, it's the hello world spec file. This is using Vitest out of the box. You can see here the scribe, it and expect is from Vitest. It's using mount from Vue test utils, and then it's importing the component. And this is essentially how you use Vue test utils. You use this wrapper, you mount it, and then you can kind of do assertions. Let's create our own tests and have something different here and do our own component. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here. I'm going to delete this spec file. And we'll do a hello world. And then we'll run npm run dev. And if we did this right, we should see an empty hello world. Cool. So here's our hello world, nothing there. Okay, let's create a component. We're going to call it View, View.vue. And this component is going to be a primitive. So we want a component that someone can pass in a span, a div, whatever HTML element they want. And then it has some props that you can add in. So something really simple to start off with. So I'm going to add a script tag. We'll do setup lang equals TypeScript. And then we're going to use our define props to start with here. So we'll do define props. And this is a macro. And we can pass in an element. It's going to be a type string. And then just for fun, we'll add an aria label. I don't know, it'll be type string. And then we'll have is disabled, and that'll be a type Boolean. So if we wanted to, I don't know, turn it on or off. And then inside our template, or disable or enable it, in our template, we're going to use this component. I don't know if not many people use this, but this is a way you can essentially create like dynamic components in Vue, which is nice. So I can just do is, and then I'll pass in this element string. And I can do an aria label, and this will be that aria label. that we just created. And then the third one we'll do is disabled. And we'll just have it to be is disabled. Now the ARIA label is complaining for a second, so because I misspelt it, ARIA, it's supposed to be capital. There it is. So this is a really simple component, and now we can run some tests on it. But first, I suppose we could see if it actually works. We can go back into our app view and import it in. So we can do import. In this case, it would be, we'll call it view from, and I believe this is in the components, and then this will be the View.vue. And we'll see here. And we got it's already giving me a red squiggly line. This is TypeScript saying, hey, you didn't pass in the element. So we'll do element equals, I don't know, div. And one other thing I just thought of is we actually want to have you be able to put information in between this. So I'm going to make this a slot. So any information between the opening and closing brackets of this component will be displayed. And that way I can do something like this. Hello from View, and then I'll close it. So let's see if that worked. Here it is, hello from View. And if you look in the inspector and we look at it in more detail, it is a div, and disabled's false. Awesome, so now we have our div element. So let's do some tests on this to see if we can get it working. So I'm gonna create a new file here. I'm gonna call it view. I think I'll call it view .spec. And this should be our spec file that we're going to be using for this test that we're going to set up. So I need to import a few things. I'm going to import render and screen, and we're going to do that from the testing library, the @testing library view. And then we're going to need some stuff from Vitest. We want at least the describe, it, and expect from Vitest. There it is. And then we need import in view from, which I think is here. And we'll need to do view.vue. Cool. So now the first thing I like to do when I set up tests is I create tests per component, and the name of the describe, which is usually how you kind of break down your tests, will be the name of the component. So in this case, it already knows for me. So view would be the first one. And then inside here, I usually put in any setups of the tests I need, and then I do it for each individual test. So I want to, let's say here, I want to have some view text. I'm going to call it hello from inside a view. And then I'm going to have my first test. And I guess while we're doing this, we can open up a separate window, and I can show you a few of the ways you can run it. Now, if you want to just run something quickly from the command line, a really neat trick is you use npx, vitest, and then the commands that you want to run. So if you remember what we did before, if you look at that package.json, it's running this -- environment JSON DOM. So we want to do that, environment JS DOM. And so now if I hit this enter here, it should start running all the files if it detects any spec files. And it did, but this says there's no tests yet, since we haven't created any tests. I think this is pretty handy because now we'll be able to keep track of the tests. And I think if I want to, I can try to move this to a different side, but maybe for now we'll just leave it kind of halfway open at the bottom, and maybe that'll work. So here is our view text, and now we want to create our first test. So we'll do render span correctly, and we'll make this async, and we'll make sure we have opening and closing brackets. And what I want to do here is I'm going to just add in, I don't know, an ID, which we're going to call view ID. Well, we'll call it view ID. And we want to, essentially we're arranging right here. We're just basically creating the setup for the test. So we have this render, and now the render is essentially how we create our component. We kind of mount it. There is in Vitest utils called mount. So this sort of the render from the testing library view is another way to do that. It's the same syntax, but it returns back something that we can use inside our Vitest utils. So we'll do view here, and now we can put in like props. We know we have a required prop of an element, which is a span. We have an ID now because we passed in an ID. We call a view ID there. Yeah, I think that'll work. And then I can do slots too. So this is like the slot is the default slot. Whatever the slot is named, you put right here, and then whatever it is. So we're going to say the default slot. Okay, now you're probably thinking, why did we use ID here? But if you look at our view, we have ARIA label is disabled. Just keep in mind with view that any props that you don't explicitly set inside here gets added to the topmost component. So ID should be added here, and we can check to make sure that test works. So now I can do view, and I'm going to use await. Now this screen is like a kind of a helper method that gives you accessibility, access to all the helper functions. So this find by text is a way it does this matching to find the values by text. So a lot of the testing library has these helper functions that kind of push you in the way of accessibility. Like you should be creating roles, and you should be creating these different accessibility and ARIA labels, and then you can do these finds by these different things without having to write it all in. So this is an easy kind of helper method for find by text. So I can put in here this view. We'll do view text, and now I can do some assertions on here to see if this works. So I'm going to do expect here, and let's try the first one. I want to make sure the view, and by the way, since I'm using TypeScript, I get auto-completion, which is nice. I'm going to do view.id, and we know that should be view ID, because that's the ID that we added right here to the prop, and it should be automatically added. So if we save this, our test automatically ran, and it says it's passing, it's green, which is good. So here it is, one passed, and we're good. So this is sort of like, you can kind of think of this in sort of a red-green refactor type way, where now we have created a test. It was red, we fixed the test, it's green, and if we really wanted to, we can go back in and refactor this. So this is not really test first development, since we already created the component, but it's a way of creating the test, seeing it fail, then fixing it and making sure it works. And then we can add some other expects in here too. So we can expect, I don't know, view.innerHTML to be the view text. So remember the slot right here had this view text, hello from inside of view. So let's make sure that it actually works there. So if I save it, cool, it's still passing. So if we scroll down the bottom, test passing. You can also just like fail the test to make sure it works. Test 1, 2, 3. And now one failed, so it's still failing. Cool, so we know it's working there. And then we can just do one more, expect view.nodename to be, well, not a span, we called it we did call it a span. Cool, so all the tests are passing, which is great. We also have availability, well, let's add in a second test. So one thing that's really cool with Vitest is you can do not just tests, but you can do snapshots as well. And, well, they're type of tests, that is. And snapshots are a way to take the look and feel of your component and kind of save it into a file. And if someone accidentally at some point changes something, it'll tell you. So that way it takes like a snapshot of what it should look like. So if someone breaks like a CSS and doesn't look the right way, then your snapshot will fail. So if I come here, let's add another one. I'm going to call this snapshot matches. And this one, I'm going to do a wrapper this time. I'm going to use the render. And same thing we did before. It's going to be the view. And then we're going to add in the props and element. This time I'll do a div. And now we can do expect wrapper. And there's this toMatch snapshot. toMatch snapshot. So if we do that, now it passes. And you can see here, there's 2 test files now, or 2 tests, and it created a snapshot for it. So see, it says snapshot right here, 1 written. So now if something changes in our view and we break it, it'll automatically error out. And I'll show you what happens. So let's say I added in, for some reason, another div here. Well, let's say, yeah, let's add in some text here. Hello world. Okay, now you can see our snapshot failed. Our test failed, and it actually kind of pastes what it sees in here. Expected 0, receive 3. So the DOM does not equal what it should be. And at this point, you can press U to update the snapshot, and then it automatically fixes it. And if you scroll, it says 1 failed. Well, now there's another one failing. But it did update it. So snapshots 1 failed, 1 updated. Tests 1 failed, 1 passed. So the snapshot's passing, but the other one is failing, which is this find by text, view text, is failing because we have this hello world in here. So I'm going to delete this. Now the snapshot is failing again, but if I do U for update, okay, now everything's passing again. Cool. So now you can see how we've been able to create a couple of different tests and create a snapshot. And I want to show you a couple of other things here real quick. So in this describe, you can also do concurrent. So this will make it so all the tests run at the same time. So it can be a little bit faster, especially if you have a bunch of async tests. You can also only run one at a time if you want. If you do it.only, that will mean it'll only run one. You can see right here, if you scroll up a little bit, 1 passed, 1 skipped. So now we've skipped 1. And you can also do skip here too. So let's take a look at some of the other commands that you can do. So here in the command line, have npx vitest environment.js DOM, but if I do run at the end, it'll just run all the tests once instead of watching it in preview. If you take the run off, then it's in watch mode and it'll update anytime any of the tests change, which is kind of helpful when you're writing tests and you're creating components at the same time. There's also another command to do if you want to get like code coverage, and you can also configure this so it's -- coverage at the end. If you did -- coverage, by the way, the first time I run it, I didn't have C8 installed, but you just have to install it. And next time it does it, it'll create a code coverage, which if you scroll up, well, you have to run it twice after it installs it C8 the first time. And now you can get this nice thing here. It says I have 100% code coverage on my View.vue file, which is really cool. And yeah, I'm good with that function there. There's a few others too. If you go to the features and getting started guide and commands, you can always add these to the script tag in your package JSON. But you can see watch, you don't have to put in watch. It'll just automatically run it if you don't have any other arguments behind the Vitest. But you can put in configurations, you can open it. There's a run mode, which we just did. You can override modes. So it's really handy. There's a lot of really good stuff in the command line you can use. Okay, let's take a look at mocking and how we can mock a request from a server. This is a little more complicated, but feel free to pause this video at any time and just look at the code. And also I'll make sure the code is linked in the description below. So first thing we need to do is I think like an easy one will be like the Pokemon API. I've done a different video on that. You can see here where I went in and created a Pokemon API. But I think this will be just real simple to start with. So first I want to create this new Pokemon API view component. So I'm going to go new file. I'm going to call it my Pokemon.view. Once again, I'm going to do script setup lang equals ts. And then I'll have my template. And I'm going to keep this as simple as I can. I'm going to have one function. It's going to be called get Pokemon. And inside this function, it's going to grab some data from this fetch endpoint, which I'm going to copy and paste from my different screen here. And now we have this Pokemon. And then once I get the data, I'm going to call it Pokemon await data.json. And then I need a ref here. So I'm going to import in ref from Vue, and then I can do const Pokemons, plural, and it's just gonna be an empty array. And then I should be able to do Pokemons.value equals Pokemons.results. Now I've already looked at this API, so I know what it is, but we'll console log it out. Pokemon. Cool. And now we should be able to use it in our template here. So I want to have just one really big ugly button. So I'm going to put a button here. It's going to call get Pokemon. We're going to do @click handler, which we'll just call get Pokemon. And then we are going to kind of go through the results. So we're going to have a div here. We're going to v4 equals, and we'll have a Pokemon, an index of in Pokemons. That should be right. And then in here, we're just going to have an h4. We want a key. Remember, always putting a key in when you're ever iterating. And this will be Pokemon.name. So if we did that, it should work. I'm going to go back to my app view. I'm going to import it in my Pokemon from components. And the name, which should be, I think it's my Pokemon.view. And if I did that right, I should have, I'm going to put a break. And then I'm going to have my Pokemon. All right, let's see if that works. I have my button, I hit it. Cool, here are all my Pokemon from the API. And nice thing too, if I go to the console, I should see an object. Yeah, here is all the information that's being returned. So what we need to do now is to actually make sure that we can mock this API out. So I want to do this. I'm going to do this. Copy object. Actually, I'm going to store object as global variable. I'm going to JSON. I don't know if you can you see this? Yeah, so you can do JSON dot stringify temp1. I don't know if there's many ways of doing this. I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to copy, control C it. And inside my tests, I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to call it mockpokemon.ts. And then I'm going to paste it, save it, and I'm going to do export. Let's see here, const Pokemon response. There it is. So it went ahead and automatically formatted to me. So now I have the whole response that I got back from the API. So I can use this later on in my mocking. Cool, cool, cool. So now I need to do a few things to get this working. Now, Vitest has a whole mocking section. If you go into here, go to mocking, you can mock out dates, functions, globals. Functions is a little easier. You just use this VI, and you can use VI .spy on, get mock name, but I want to show you requests. Requests, they recommend that you use the mock server worker. So it really works well with Vitest. So that's what we're going to do. So we have to actually install a couple of things to get this working. So I'm going to do npm-i -i-d. We're going to do whatwg-fetch because we need to somehow, since we're using fetch in our client side, we need to have a polyfill for it. So we're going to fake the fetch request, and then we're going to install msw2. And now we should be able to set this up. Now we can, in our Vite config, which we will go into, we're going to create, let's see here, in my Vite config file, since Vitest is working with Vite, I can add in this test. And this test is talking, basically Vitest will look for this. And I'll do globals true, which which we'll need for our tests. And then we'll do setup files. And this is a nice way of creating a place where you can have additional configuration that runs before all the tests. So we're gonna have this new source setup tests.js file. And I can actually do it TS if we want, because it's TypeScript. Awesome. Now we need to create this test file. So I'm gonna go here in my source tests. Actually, I'll just put in the source folder. I'll create a new file. I'll call it setup test.ts. I don't know if you can see that. I just created one in that folder. And now all I'll need to do is actually get that up and running. So instead of you seeing me type for the next 5 minutes, I'm gonna copy and paste this from another page. So what this is essentially right out of the documentation for MSW. Essentially, this is how you mock out the test. So what we're doing here is we're telling it, and by the way, I need to put the correct Pokemon response name. I think I called it mocked. If I did that right, it should go away. Cool. So now I have, this is the REST handler. So anytime MSW sees this API being hit, it will return this JSON, which I had already created earlier. If you remember, I copied and pasted the output from the actual Pokemon service into this file. And then it also says, as soon as you run tests, make sure you set up the server, which is a command from the MSW node. You close it at the end of all tests, and then you reset the handlers after each test. And if I did this all correctly, now we should be able to create a test for this Pokemon API and make sure it works, which is really neat. So let's do the next thing here. Let's close a few of these files. I need to, in my tests, I'm going to create a new test. And this is going to be called mypokemon.spec.ts. And in this one, I always like to start off with another spec file. I can just copy and paste. So that way I don't have to try to figure it all out. And so once we're going to delete a few things here, we're going to call this my Pokemon. We're just going to do, we don't need this. I'm going to delete the other it. Don't need that. We're going to not use view. We're going to do the my Pokemon. And this should be called my-pokemon.view. That's what I called it, right? Yeah, my.pokemon.view. And then in here, we don't need this test ID. We're going to render my Pokemon, and we don't have any slots or anything. So it should be like this. And in this view here, we're going to find let's delete the rest of this. Let's see what we want to do next. So we're rendering the Pokemon API, but we want to first go here and await. We're going to find by text, and we're going to find the button. So we're just going to find it by the text here, get Pokemon. And then I'm going to wait, and I have this new way you can do things here. I'm doing this thing called Fire. I think it's called Fire Event. That's what it's called. And this is a way we can do click events. It's a part of the testing library. It's pretty awesome. So I can do click here, and I just pass in the Pokemon. And I have an error here because this should be dot. There we go. And now that will click the button as if it's a user. And now I should be able to see, once again, find by, let's say, find by text. And we know that one of them was Bulbasaur. And we could do a whole bunch of tests here. We can check to see if all of them are there, if all 20 of them are there. But let's just see if we can get one. And then we're going to assert, we're going to do a spec here, that value.inner, let's see here, should be value.inner, if I could spell right, HTML, to be Bulbasaur. So I'm going to save it here. Oh, I messed this up. This should be find by text. There it is. So if I run npm run test unit, so it failed, but let's take a look here. Oh, that's the snapshot failed. Cool, so everything's passing. It was able to do this work here. It says 3 passed, and it looks good. Now, if I put in one that wasn't there, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. Now it failed, so it didn't find that Bulbasaur 1, 2, 3, but it did find Bulbasaur. Awesome, so now if I save it again, go back to the bottom, you can even see it pasted here. It all passed. Again, you can see here's the console log where it grabbed all the information. Awesome, so now we have created a test. We've mocked out the API using MSW. We've tested it and it works. That's awesome. The last thing I want to show you is how you can do inline tests inside your own Vue or React or Svelte components, which is kind of crazy. I guess this came from Rust, but you can create basically tests inside your files. So let's take a look here. So let's go into, I don't know, View.vue, and let's create a test. So to create a test, I'm going to create a really simple one, and I'm going to copy and paste this again from another screen to just speed things up. And by the way, just if you don't know, you can add multiple script setups or multiple scripts inside a Vue file. You can only have one script setup. So in this case, I have a script lang equals ts. And now what you do, here's a function that just adds 2 numbers. And I use this thing called import.meta.vitest. And right now it's giving me red squiggly lines. We'll try to fix that. But this will basically say, if this exists, go ahead and run this test, which just adds, it checks the add, you put add 1, 2, 3, and it's, in this case, 3, 4, 5, 6. Should be 6, I believe. So we can test to see if this works. To get this working, we have to do a couple more configurations. First, in our Vite config file, we have global setup files. We need to add one called include source. I can do this right. Yeah, I think it's include source. And this should be an array. So I'm going to do source start slash dot. And then in here, you can put which files you want to include. So I'm going to say JS, TS, and Vue. So now Vue should be like a normal file it sees. And then on top of that, we need to go into our TS, since our TypeScript is not happy with us. We can go to tsconfig.app.json, and inside here, we're going to add in under compiler options types. And then we need to add in this type for Vitest / import meta, if I did that right. And then in our Vite, we'll do one more. In our Vite config, we can actually, in this test, there's one other thing we can do, is when you're running it in production, you can tell it to be undefined, so it's always false. So we'll put in here I believe is it define? It should be define here. Define, not inside the test. And then it's there, that's an object. And then in the object, you can put in import.meta.vitest undefined. Okay, so if we did that right, first, if we go back to our Vue, it's still giving us a right squiggly line, but if we, I don't know, let's do a TypeScript. Let's do a reload window. Cool, so you can see everything passed, and this time it actually included one test from the View.vue file. You can see tests 4 passed. Awesome. And you can see here, we're no longer getting any errors, red squiggly lines. So this works. And if you run this for production, it'll ignore this, and this won't be included. And with the dead code removal with Vite, it won't even include this in your source files. I don't know if you really want to do this kind of testing. Maybe if you have a utility somewhere and you want to add some quick tests to it. I'd rather keep it in its own file, but it's kind of cool that Vite gives us the option of doing this. All right, well, I hope you guys learned something here. There's a lot that's in this Vite ecosystem. I didn't get to all the different features. If you guys want to, check out the vitest.dev if you want to look at it. But I think I gave you guys a lot of the basics of getting started and a few things like mocking. That'll become very important for you. If you made it all the way to this end of this video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Make sure you check out that .tech domains, breaking the code too. Check out the link in the description. Click on that. It's a really cool contest. They're awesome for sponsoring this video. So thank you. Take care.